Give me 9 minutes and I'll improve your fundraising success by showing you why 90% of founders fail to raise money. And it has nothing to do with your product or your market size. Because fundraising is one of the most critical skills for any founder, but most of the advice out there focuses on the wrong things. Things like pitch decks, financial projections, market analysis. And look, these things are important, but the truth is successful fundraising is actually pretty simple if you know what really matters and why investors make the decisions that they do. So if you just give me to the end of this video, you'll discover why storytelling is the secret weapon that separates funded founders from the 90% who never raise a dime. But before we dive in, let me show you a quick example from Derek, a founder I worked with. It's a simple story, but it completely transformed how investors saw his company and fundamentally what happened with what he did in his funding round. So Derek was in his first investor meeting, and instead of leading with market size or revenue projections, he just told his story about a customer that he helped. So he said, look, let me tell you about Harry. Harry never thought he'd be able to own a home in his life. He tried saving for years, failed multiple times, and was resigned to renting forever. But within 1 year of using our platform, Harry bought his first home. He went from feeling hopeless about home ownership to holding his house keys, something that would have taken him 3 to 5 years the traditional way if he could have actually done it at all. So what do you think the investors' reaction was? Well, they went from thinking this is just another cool startup to, holy shit, this is fundamentally changing how people buy homes. And Derek was able to raise $2 million from that round. Now, did you notice what Derek did there? He didn't start with market data. He didn't say the housing market is worth $2 trillion and we're addressing inefficiency in the mortgage processes. Instead, he zoomed into one person's transformation. He took the investor into Harry's emotional journey from hopelessness to home ownership and the transformation he had into being able to do that. And look, the best fundraising pitches, they don't just present data. You're just boring and unforgettable if you do that. They don't just stay at the market analysis level, which is good and it's important, but it's not the reason why investors are going to invest. They zoom into the human impact and they take investors into the trenches of real people's lives or real businesses' lives that you've affected and improved for the better in your product. Now, I should mention, I've been on both sides of the table, right? I was a founder raising myself. I was a VC at a tier one, investing into dozens of companies. And here's what I discovered. Every single company we invested into had one thing in common. They told us stories that made us feel emotionally connected to their mission, and we wanted to invest because we felt that mission and we wanted to be a part of it. Now, using these same techniques, I've helped founders raise over $250 million. And I'm going to show you exactly why storytelling is the difference, because here's the reality most founders don't understand. You're not just competing against your direct competitors. You're competing against hundreds of other founders for the same investor's attention and memory. An investor might see 500 pitches a year, and after a week, they've forgotten 99% of them. But the ones they do remember are the ones that told stories and are the ones they're actually going to end up investing into. So I'm going to show you the 5 storytelling techniques that will make your fundraising pitch unforgettable. And the first one is all about human impact. So we don't want to just start with the market size. We want to start with one person whose life you're changing. For example, instead of saying the $50 billion mental health market, say, meet Sarah, who hadn't slept through the night in 2 years due to anxiety, until she found our app, and now she's actually able to sleep purely from what we've been helping her with. So you're probably asking, like, why does this matter? Well, because investors invest into solutions to human problems, not just market opportunities. So when you lead with human impact, they immediately understand why your company needs to exist, and then you can focus on the market. Then you can do the things that you need to do, but you need to do this first part to make them. And that takes us on to the second technique, because without it, you can't show the human impact to an investor. So what is the second technique? Well, the second technique is all about the transformation moments that you have, i.e. the specific moment when everything changed for your customer. You need to make them feel and understand the before and after of what they went through. So instead of saying our users see improved outcomes, say, Harry went from checking his bank account every morning with dread to confidently putting in an offer of an extreme home within just 12 months, whereas it would have taken him 5 years plus if he was even able to do it. So why does this work? Because transformation moments are visual. Investors can actually picture that exact moment of change, and they want to be a part of creating more moments like that because they know that the best companies or the biggest companies create those moments of change all the time. So what we're trying to do with our stories is we're trying to show them those transformation moments as much as possible. And that's what takes us to the third part, because we need to make investors understand those transformations. Otherwise, it won't make any sense. So instead of saying customers struggled with the existing process, say Harry felt like home ownership was something that happened to other people, not him. He'd given up on that dream entirely, but when he joined us, it was completely different. So what we're doing here is we're sharing what your customers were feeling at the time, not just what they were doing. And that's what really sets out the human impact and the transformation in a much better way. What we're doing is we're sharing what your customers are feeling. And this matters because investors need to feel the emotional weight of the problem you're solving. And when they feel it, they understand why customers will pay for your solution. And that's what brings us to the fourth technique, which is all about how to help investors see themselves in your story. Because what we've done so far is we've been very abstract. We've talked about the customer in a great way, but now we need to actually bring them in. So instead of just describing your customer, coming back to the Harry point, we need to say something like, maybe you remember that feeling when you bought your first home, that mix of terror and excitement. Well, that's exactly what Harry felt, except he never thought he'd actually get there because he never was able to save, and he never thought he could do it in a year like we could do it. Now, why do you think this is powerful? Well, because now the investor isn't just hearing about Harry, they're remembering their own experience and connecting emotionally to your mission and feeling it from their own feelings about how your customer would feel it and the transformation that you've done, and they're really understanding the impact. So once we have them hooked into a personal experience for themselves, we want to end with them showing them the future if they join you and a story around how you can do that. So you need to paint a picture of the world you're creating, not just the product you're building. And that's where I see a lot of founders go wrong. So instead of saying, we're building a fintech platform, say, imagine a world where home ownership isn't determined by your parents' wealth or your ability to navigate complex financial systems or necessarily having the best job ever. Where someone like Harry can go from renter to homeowner in months, not years, and every single person can do this if we just implement this in the right way. Because this works because investors want to fund the future, and when you help them visualize that future world, they want to be part of building it. So these are the 5 parts to a great story. Now let me tell you how powerful this is. I'll use an example. Charlie used stories about specific clients he helped and raised $3 million. Keith raised $1.7 million about helping doctors in hospital settings. Chris shared stories about gaming and teams and it raised 4.3. And the pattern for all of them, as well as every other successful founder that I've worked with, has led with human stories. The market data can come, but we need to lead with the human stories first to get people hooked into, willing to learn about your market data. And now here's where most founders get wrong. You think investors want to hear about TAM and SAM and SOM and competitive analysis. But here's the truth. Investors can Google your market size. They can't necessarily Google how your product changes lives and why you think that. And they won't want to learn about your business and get into the data if they aren't sold emotionally. And that's really what storytelling does. So don't make the mistake of burying your human impact story away or focus too much on numbers without the human context of why you're saying them and what makes you and your product so great. So look, today you learned why storytelling is the secret weapon of successful fundraising. You learned the 5 techniques that make investors remember you and connect you with your mission and want to be a part of your journey. But there are also advanced fundraising techniques that can take your pitch to the next level. If you want to go deeper on this journey, check out my next video where you'll learn the psychological triggers that make investors say yes. See you there.